You just heard Supernatural from John Mayall and the Blues Breakers featuring guitarist Peter Green. This is the Recommendal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And we are going to be doing a cool little adventure today. For those of you that have been loyal Requiem Podcast fans for quite a while, you might remember the Stooges and the MC5 show that we've done in the past years that featured somebody that's near and dear to Mark, our friend Mike Johnston. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, thanks for having me again.
And Mike, why don't you kind of give us a little, I can give your credentials, but I think you do probably a better job of where your expertise, both with rock and music and being a musician and how we know each other, maybe, and stuff like that.
All right, I'll try to keep it brief.
The 30-second version.
Yeah, right. But I grew up in the 60s. I was born in the 50s, and I grew up listening to rock and roll, and I got into blues rock, I would say more than most styles, and that led me to listen to the blues and then jazz, and I really got into jazz and started playing music in the late 60s, early 70s, and met a friend, Mike Gilmore, and we started a band in 1976, and we still play together. It's called the Northwoods Improvisers, and we've got, 18, 20 recordings out.
Yeah.
And I play bass, stand-up double bass, a little bit of electric bass here or there. I do a radio program on CMU Public Radio, and worked at a record store in Traverse City where I grew up in the early 70s. And then in 1978, I was in school in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where we're at right now.
The homeland.
Home court.
Yeah.
And I worked at a record store called Boogie Records, and I continued to work there, and it's just a new owner went to Full Moon, and then it went to another store for about a year, and then New Moon Records, and I managed New Moon Records, and hired both of you guys.
And we talk a lot about New Moon on the
and we
program,
became really good friends, and we're all really into music, and that was one of the things that really mattered to me when I managed the store is I wanted everyone to be there, to be into music. Didn't really care what kind, just to really be into it, because everybody in my mind, that's really into music, is pretty open and cool about all music styles. And so that's our connection. And I still play music. I now teach at a couple of community colleges, music courses, and still play and do a radio program. And I'm still very active in music and listening, and
that's one of the cool connections that Mark and I have brought in too, is because of the classes that you teach that influenced me, and now I teach the rock history class, and I talk a little bit about that on Requiem quite a bit.
People can go on; they can listen to Destination Out online.
Well, right? they have them up for 2 weeks after the broadcast. I do it on Sunday nights. And and the online thing has been pretty cool. I mean, just like what you guys are strictly there, it's really opened up kind of a
new fan base. And stuff like
global thing that's pretty cool. And I have listeners, steady listeners in different places.
Now, are you still doing? Speaking of kind of are you still doing the rock show around New Year's Eve?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. That's coming up. In fact, that's probably a couple of the tunes we're going to cover in these shows I'll be using. So, and
we decided to, it's not often that Mark and I get to come back up to Mount Pleasant. We used to do famous recordings at the Godfather Mansion, which is my aunt and uncle's place out west of town here. But they got divorced, and so we don't have access to the hot tub and all the
things.
I know. So
things change.
I know. And then my mom doesn't live here anymore, so it's tougher for Mark and I to get here. So we really wanted to make a point over my Christmas break and stuff to get here and do some stuff.
We could do this.
And what we decided to do is because Mike's expertise when we originally tapped him was Michigan rock stuff with the early punk rock kind of proto metal stuff with the Stooges and MC5, and this is kind of a totally different direction, I would say. Yeah. And Peter Green is kind of where the focus is going to be, and specifically his time with Fleetwood Mac, but also a little solo stuff. And this is kind of, where he came from. His roots is with John Mayall.
I grew up in what you call the Guitar Hero era, Hendrix and Peter Green and Duane Allman and Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page and, the first guitar players you might call virtuoso rock players,
For sure.
And Peter Green is my favorite of all of them. Teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, but who's the best guitar player? I mean, how do you measure that?
Yeah.
It's like you can't. Somebody thinks the fastest guy's the best or whatever. My point I'm getting at is that Peter Green is not the fastest guitar player, but
I actually think his technique is where he's so awesome, and you can disagree with me. Is he's slow.
Yeah,
he's patient. He's more patient than almost any of those guys you just listed.
I think he conveys more feeling than any other guitar player, anybody that I've ever listened to. As I've gotten older playing music, when I was younger, I was really into freedom of expression. And then when we were playing with Farouk, I really got into layering and the idea of layering different things in a piece of music. But since Farouk's passed away in 2012, I really am into how you convey feeling and emotion through an instrument, not with words or your voice, but with an instrument, and how that's done and the people that are really good at it. And Peter Green, I always come back to him. I think he is the best guitar player at that I've ever heard.
B.B. King, emotion.
Yeah, and B.B. King felt the same way. He said he was the best white blues guitar player he ever heard.
Speaking of B.B. King, I wrote a quote down. He said, Peter Green was exquisitely melancholy, and he said he was the only guitar player who gave him chills when he heard him. B.B. King's no slouch.
Yeah, I can believe it. And go back to the Supernatural song that we opened up with. I might be wrong, but I've tried to look at this very thoroughly. I think it's the first song of controlled feedback that was ever recorded. It's before Beck did it. It's before Jimmy Page did it. It's before Ted Nugent did it.
67?
This is like 66.
Okay.
And it might have been early 66. In the type of control that he's got, it isn't like he's just holding a note.
It's not like Shape of Things, where that was just like out of control.
Yeah, if you listen really carefully, I mean, he's totally pinpoint controlling the whole tonal shape of the feedback. I mean, it's impeccable. It's part of the song, and it's really a remarkable song. I remember when I first heard it, I was quite young, and it was before Hendrix was putting stuff out on his own, and it just was stunning.
Sure.
And I to get into a personal story, I remember one night we were at a cabin listening to music, and we had a fire going in a stove, and I was laying on a couch, and I was looking at the ceiling, at the flames flickering on the ceiling. And when I heard that song and another Peter Green song from the album, it just seemed like to totally blend with the flame,
the flickering flames.
And I never
like
ever
that.
experienced that with anybody else, maybe except Coltrane later on or somebody like that. I mean, maybe Farouk, but it seemed to me like, and I like him, so I'm kind of hyper about it, but it just seems like he kind of tapped, supernatural forces somehow that he was able, like they're just certain.
It's the same thing, kind of like people, the supernatural aspect people claim when they hear like Voodoo Child from Hendrix.
Right,
it's like he's playing with like dark arts or something.
Yeah, no, in his sound, Peter Green's sound is still my favorite sound on the electric guitar. He had a Les Paul. Supposedly, he screwed it up and he rewired the pickups, and he screwed it up when he rewired them, and it added that extra sustain to it. And then later on, people took it apart, and then they made a Peter Green model, wiring it the way that he.
Oh, really?
Yeah, screwed
Is
it
that
up.
still today something like a guitar player?
Yeah. So but it was sort of like one of those serendipity type accidents, and he, just happened to.
And they would refer to him sometimes like kind of like Clapton, like the Green God, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of how they would talk about him.
And I like Clapton. I kind of dissed him a lot for a while when I was younger, but I've grown to really appreciate him. But I think Peter Green is
he runs circles around.
Yeah, way more expressive.
I agree.
And imaginative and all that. And to me, Cream, Jack Bruce was the imaginative guy in the band,
And even Ginger, some of the stuff he was doing,
Yeah. But I'm not knocking Clapton. I used to, but I think he's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, I've kind of come around on Clapton too.
Yeah,
I think.
well, and we're going to do Allman Brothers Band later, and Dwayne Allman and Eric Clapton were buddies, and I think Dwayne Allman is in this category as well.
Yep.
Best slide player, probably.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, so.
Now, so John Mayall, for people that don't know, and because we talk about this probably in our rock history, he was sort of known for kind of taking these musicians under his wing and almost like a Obi-Wan Kenobi, like a Zen master, molding their energy, because the three that came out of this particular segment, I mean, Clapton got his chops before he joined Cream.
Yeah.
But the three people that are in this particular group that played Supernatural were Mick Fleetwood, John McVie, and Peter Green, right?
Right. And then the other thing that I should just mention, that's an instrumental song, too. And that was in an era where instrumental songs...
Pretty rare.
Yeah. I mean...
You had the Ventures, you had a few kind of guitar
Hendrix barely did instrumental
bands.
songs, right? I mean, it's really... And he did them frequently, and that's really unique. I mean, I think he was really... all about speaking through his guitar, You're
talking about
Peter Green.
Peter Green? Okay. I didn't know if you were saying like John Mayall kind of was the guy that would push them to do
No, I agree with what you said, though. He recognized good talent and gave them a lot of freedom to be themselves. I guess that's what his strength was. Mick Taylor, was great too. Yeah,
and Taylor worked with Bowie, right?
And Rolling Stones.
Mm-hmm. So I mean... So what happened then at a certain point? Peter Green just kind of decides, from what I've read, that he wants to do his own kind of thing, right? And he asks Mick and John.
Right, he puts a band together, and Mick Fleetwood joined immediately, and John McVie refused to, so he names the band Fleetwood Mac, so that
John kind of has to join.
Yeah, because his name's in the band. Yeah. And the record producer wanted it to be called Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, and Peter Green wanted him to drop.
He didn't want his name associated.
He didn't want his name associated with it. And so he names the band after his friends, which is pretty unique.
Kind of the rhythm section.
Right, and it shows things to come where he downplays himself and is very uncomfortable being in the limelight.
Now, would you say that that's kind of, people talk about like Hendrix not being able to deal sometimes with fame, or like Nick Drake, or where would you put like the psychology of a guy like Peter Green in terms of like you hear about the archetype of like the Kurt Cobains, these guys that almost couldn't handle the fame or didn't want to deal with the popularity? Yeah,
I just think, some of those people, for one, they're consumed with music, and and
too
being a rock star. I mean, you have athletes now that are, grow up in the slums, and then all of a sudden the next day they're a millionaire and can't handle it. It's like nobody's preparing these people to be famous. And how do you handle it? And then also, I don't know. There is a, playing music. I played in scenarios where there is sort of like there's such a power in it when it's good and when you feel like it's good, and to be a young kid and all of a sudden have all that power. You know, I listen to like Supernatural and I think, wow, you know, like he's
like wielding a weapon.
Yeah, exactly, a big weapon. And how do you handle that? And then when other people tap into it and hear it the way that maybe you wanted to present it or that you're hearing it, it sort of snowballs really fast. And like I said, I don't think nobody was prepared for rock and roll, let alone being a rock star or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't a formula for it yet. There weren't.
I mean, that's why people would go to like Beatles' Hard Day's Night with like a notebook and take notes. Like, this is how we have to be a rock star.
Exactly.
You know?
And again, you know, these are not like people that are trained to be politicians.
No.
Or, you know, they're just street people that all of a sudden like.
Or they're really introspective.
Yeah,
like
right. You tap into something really heavy and you know it, but then what do you do with it, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then that's the other thing. You know, you take a guy like Peter Green, and while he's playing, you know, he's, you know, really heavy and powerful. And then when you're done playing, you're a person that needs a sandwich or a drink of water. And you know, so it's like when you start to get treated otherwise.
Like pampered.
Yeah.
I was talking to Mark about one of the problems Hendrix had is he got surrounded by these sycophantic people that were like feeding off of his power, and they were telling him all these bad choices. You know, and Hendrix himself was not he was a really mellow, pretty carefree, nice guy, but you get surrounded by these sycophantic weirdos that are
the
feeding
business,
off of you.
really
you know?
messes with it, because how much of being the rock star is actually playing music and how much is all the other crap.
And most true musicians don't want to deal with the other crap. They just want to play. Just let me play my art. But that's not how the game's played.
The only people that want to deal with the crap are the ones that want to get rich. I mean, that's their goal. You know, everybody else doesn't want to mess with any of that.
And that's always been, I feel like, from what I've read, like not a slight knock on like a guy like Mick Fleetwood. He kind of had his eyes on the prize a little bit more maybe than Peter Green did. But
you said you watched that video, you know, that they put out. And one thing I came away from with that is that I think all those guys are really stupid compared to Peter Green. Even him in a fried state is way on another level than them. I don't think they even understood what
he was doing.
No, they didn't. You know, they were just doing what he told them to do, and if they couldn't, he would overdub it. You know, I mean, really. You know, and I think that, you know, they come off as kind of idiotic even in that. I think Fleetwood comes off way better than Jeremy Spencer, who seems like a moron.
Did Spencer kind of get fried too, or was that Danny Kerwin?
Yeah, he kind of. And Kerwin got really fried. Yeah, he was like he was.
These are other guitar players from this era of Fleetwood Mac that we're about to talk about.
You know, he was a street drunk after that. I don't think any of them were really prepared to
deal with some of the stuff. So talk about, I guess, because what we're about to play, I had this reaction literally like 2 nights ago. We're recording this, like I said, around Christmas, and my stepdad, who's a big fan of music and stuff, he had no idea that this era of Fleetwood Mac existed.
Yeah, I know. Most people don't.
And so talk about how
the real band.
Yeah, like talk about this disconnect that maybe exists between the Peter Green era and like the Stevie Nicks, Lindsey. I mean,
I think that for one, we're talking about Fleetwood. Yeah, I think he wasn't. I think he's into music. I think he's genuinely into it.
He's not a bad drummer.
No, he's great.
Great rhythm section.
Yeah, no. And I think that he wanted to keep playing music, and I think that he worships Peter Green. You know, I don't know that he gets it, but he worships him. You know, he knew it was great music they were making. I mean, thankfully, you know, and so, but I think that he kept the band name because, you know, out of respect, because Peter Green named him that. And,
but they're basically two completely different bands.
And I don't, you know, again, you can't predict the kind of fame that they got, right? I mean,
no one knew
with Stevie Nicks, and I think that they just, you know, again, he heard a cool sound and he went with it, and they got even larger than they did when Peter Green was alive, and you know that's carried the rest all the way through. And as far as a pop band, which is what I would call them later on, they're real good at it. They're a good pop band. I mean, they're not as dumb as most of them.
Sure,
you know, just
Stevie Nicks, I love her voice. Yeah, I think she's got a really
she's you know, I mean, she's a little bizarre at times, but I think that, you know, she's a good songwriter, and again, I think they really crafted their songs. Mm-hmm. They didn't just like put any old thing out there, and so I mean, there's a lot to admire about the whole Fleetwood Mac history. But I mean, once Peter Green like dropped out of the thing,
It just became a
it was a different band. Yeah. I mean, and it's understandable. I mean, it's like you can't have a Hendrix or the Doors.
You can't beat the Jimi Hendrix experience without Jimi Hendrix.
Or the Doors without Jim Morrison.
For sure. So this next song that we're going to kind of start the set off with, this is a song a lot of people are going to know. They're going to know it because of the Santana version.
Right.
For instance, the conversation my stepdad had with me is, wait, this is a Fleetwood Mac song? I thought Santana wrote this, And we're going to be playing a lot of versions from this really great Live at the Boston Tea Party concert that was recorded in 1970, I believe, over 3 nights or something like that.
With Green.
And a lot more improvisations than, say, the studio versions is what you would hear and stuff.
Right.
But
the lyrics are Peter Green lyrics. Once you know him and know about his history and,
So what's going on with the song, like Black Magic Woman?
Well, again, that supernatural, black magic.
Sure.
I think Peter Green felt all these powerful forces, and however, personally he related to them, you can only speculate that. But, to me, I think that, he attracted a lot of people because of his musicianship and then, had to deal with it and wasn't really good at it.
I think too, like, we'll make references a little bit later when we get, like, near Green Manalishi, which is one of the songs, like, a lot of our listeners will know because Judas Priest did a really famous cover of it. He was talking about Robert Johnson stuff. Like, selling your soul to the devil, like the mythos of the actual like blues.
Yeah, I mean, he was into the blues. And then one other comment about Black Magic Woman. Peter Green, when he heard Santana's remake of it, he dug all the percussion on it, and that's the direction he wanted to take his music, was to add more percussion into his band, and started to do that. But then he kind of had a total breakdown,
which we'll get into.
Yeah, but so he was attracted to what Santana did with that song. So,
but like, for instance, really the first two Fleetwood Macs didn't sell that well. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until they cut this single that we're going to hear after Black Magic Woman, which is Albatross, that like things kind of the fates changed.
Right.
So before we kind of get to Black Magic Woman, let's talk, I guess, about Albatross too, because they're going to hear that. I mean, this is one of the more. I mean, you just talked about with Supernatural. It's really rare to do an instrumental, let alone instrumental that is going to top the charts.
Right, number one in England. Right.
Yeah, I mean, they said they were on tour in America, and they came back. They had the number one record in England, like 2 weeks later, and they were rock stars.
It's a beautiful composition, and from my understanding, he had the song totally figured out, and so it's got like the main guitar riff. It's got sort of like the call and response, the guitar off in the distance. The Albatross, again, another...
it was a Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner kind of reference.
And the Albatross is like the bird that can fly the farthest from shore to sea. And,
but it's also like a omen. It's like a bad omen, too, which gets into that supernatural element.
Yeah, exactly, right. So... and it ended up being his Albatross.
No, this was
because it got famous.
This almost sealed his fate.
So he named it. But... to people listening, if maybe you're hearing it for the first time or listening more carefully, the guitar dialogue, which goes back to the old blues, the call and response. But the other thing that's really incredible in this is that he overdubbed a second bass line in it. And you kind of hear it almost like the drums, but it's like the bass line goes do-doon, do-doon, do-doon. And it's
the pulsing part, right?
But there's one bass line, and then there's a counter bass line that he added later that McVie supposedly couldn't play because he couldn't hear it, and so Peter Green dubbed in the second bass line the way he heard it. He had Fleetwood stay on mallets on the drums because he wanted it to have a certain kind of feeling. And again, this is really totally orchestrated by him, and this is like where I think the other members of the band were just kind of lost. Like, okay, we'll do that, but I don't know why we're doing it, but it sounds cool. And I mean, this is kind of like what I get out of the history that I read.
Well, and a lot of people didn't like a lot of the traditional, the actual Fleetwood Mac fans didn't like this song because it wasn't really like traditional blues. It was like this sort of contemplative harmonies and gorgeous floating things. I even played a song we were talking earlier. It kind of connects to like a little bit of Chuck Berry, the Deep Feeling song.
Which I hadn't. If I'd heard it before, I'd forgotten it. So.
And with a little bit of venture. I mean, there's you can almost hear the waves crashing and like there's like this very surf kind of like.
And that would be something else I'd add about Peter Green. It's one thing to be a great musician, it's another thing to be able to paint a picture with sound.
for sure.
And I think Hendrix could do that. And I think Peter Green was a visionary. There's some jazz musicians that I put in that category. But it's like they're kind of passing on something that they see in a concrete way, and you're able to like get it.
Yeah, and they're like
that, and then with an instrumental, it just sort of heightens the whole thing for my imagination. That about the power of sound and music and all that stuff.
So before we get into it, because we need to get to the set, but one thing I was going to mention before about Black Magic Woman was when I heard Supernatural, I could almost start to hear the phrasing that he was going to do with Black Magic Woman.
Yeah.
Is that something like it's almost some of the same kind of tones and the vibrato that he's going to put into that?
I think he worked in certain areas of the guitar quite frequently, but he just had impeccable feel and timing, and so he was able to. And he worked with dynamics incredibly well too. Yeah. And so I think that he wasn't afraid to be quiet.
But then he could also be sharp.
Right. And when he delivered the hammer blow, it was outstanding. And but he had one of the better senses of dynamics, I think, of any of the guitar players we talked about too.
Cool. All right. Anything special about this live version of Black Magic Woman that people
I just like it because it's live. I love live music, and I think it really shows what people are capable of, and it's got a little more power. You really get to hear his guitar sound on it live, and
it's a little more improv.
Too, right. Yeah, it breaks off into some jamming and which I like. That kind of thing, and you get to hear his guitar playing, which is cool. So
cool. And we're going to hear actually a couple of songs from the Live at Boston Tea Party in this set. We're going to start with Black Magic Woman, then we're going to hear the Albatross single that we were talking about, which you can find on a lot of different compilations. I think it's on the Pious Bird, which is a collection of their singles.
It is their most famous song with him, so it does.
It shows up on a lot of things. And then we're going to hear another tune from Live at Boston Tea Party, which is Oh Well, which is one of, for metalheads, probably one of the more sonic songs. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
And that was redone by, I'm spacing on Rockets.
Oh, okay.
And I think McCarty, the guitar player out of Detroit, that was a band he was in. And again, this is before your era at the store, but that song was huge by the Rockets, probably way more than Fleetwood Mac.
Really?
So,
cool. And that's got a great sonic quality. We'll chat about that. And then Before the Beginning, which is a live version from a concert from New Orleans.
Yes. Yeah. And that was in that tour at the Boston Tea Party. And it was the last time they were in New Orleans. And, we can maybe get to this a little bit later, but they were all heavily dosed on LSD. And if you listen carefully on that song, Jeremy Spencer, I guess, was so high that he kind of didn't know where he was at. And you can kind of hear him just moaning the whole time, all the way through the song. But I think the version is killer because of the lyrics and because of Peter Green's guitar playing.
He's
stellar.
at like a next level on this.
It's really incredible. But, they just said that they were so high they barely even knew where they were at. And Jeremy Spencer, never even remembered the night. In that
Is that where he wandered off at one point? They lost him in one city?
I kind of remember.
I read about that too.
One other comment. In that year, 1970, they played down in Detroit, and I was a huge fan, and I got tickets to go, and I read because I was so into him in Melody Maker that Peter Green quit the band and wasn't going to tour with them. So I gave my tickets to somebody.
Oh, but he finished the tour,
But they talked him into finishing the tour. So when my friend came back and said that Peter Green was there, I didn't even believe him. And it was just like, if I hadn't been educated and so into it, I would have gone.
Oh, man.
And that really...
Mark and I talk about that, too. We passed up seeing Dio. We were at the concert. Yeah. Dio walked by us, but we ended up hanging out with this British band instead, Night Iron Bride, because we were more into them at the time. Yeah. And Dio dies, and we're like, Jesus, one of the regrets.
Yeah, right, exactly. But that's one for me for sure. It was just like, oh man.
So enjoy Black Magic Woman, Albatross, Oh Well, and then Before the Beginning, which we'll talk about those when we come back.
Before we get started, I'd just like to say that we are making a live recording here tonight and should be A-OK. So right now, Boston Tea Party is proud to present to you the one and only, incredible Fleetwood Mac. Come on, say it for him.
a black magic woman. I've got a black magic woman. Yes, I got a black magic woman. She's got me so blind I can't see that she's a black magic woman and she's trying to make the devil out of me. Don't turn your back on me, baby. Now don't turn your back on me, baby. Don't turn your back on me, baby. You're messing around with the tricks. Turn your back on me, baby, 'cause you might just break up my magic stick. Got your spell on me, baby. You got your spell on me, baby. Yes, you got your spell on me, baby. You're turning my heart into stone. I need you so bad, magic woman, I can't leave you alone. Yes, I need you so bad. I need you, darling. Yes, I need you, darling. I want you to love me. I want you to love me. I want you to love me. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I want you to love me. Oh yeah. can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin. But don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answer that you want me to. Now when I talked to God, I knew he'd understand. He said, stick by me and I'll be your guiding hand. But don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answer that you want me to. So many nights I lay awake, can't sleep. Maybe think about a woman I used to love. Can't sleep, but no good to count sheep. I'll just count the worries I've got plenty of. But how many times must I be the fool before I can make it, oh, make it on home? I've got to find a place to sing my words. Is there nobody listening to my song? Talk about life, searching for the key, but can't find an answer to comfort me. Ask myself about love, can't even find the door to take me to a place I've never seen before. But how many times must I be the fool before I can make it, oh, make it home? I've got to find a place to sing my words. Oh, is there nobody listening to my song?
You just heard Black Magic Woman, Albatross, Oh Well, and then we end it with Before the Beginning, which was a cool live version. You can find the original on a record called Then Play On, which is probably the Peter Green studio masterpiece, right?
Yeah, definitely with Fleetwood Mac. And that song was a single as well.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, it was like part 1 and part 2, and part 1 was the jam kind of part, the opening.
And so, Oh Well, we were just kind of listening to it before we kind of came back from that. I mean, you sort of said like the riffing on that is just, it's just different than what you would have heard in that era.
Yeah,
it's metallic in a way, but
right,
it's
and
also,
it doesn't really sound as bluesy as Zeppelin and Clapton still were at the time. It's kind of moving away into something else, and it's not really metal, but it's not really totally blues rock.
Yeah.
It's very original, and there's a lot of dynamics. I like that about it. You know, it's just sort of, it's unhinged at times, and then it's like super quiet and controlled, and it just, it's orchestrated, and again, it's a Peter Green. You know, he really, you know, you were commenting on the cowbell and the congas, and you know, from what I've read, you know, he was the one that wanted him to, you know, he heard Santana, he liked the hand drums, and he was trying to bring in a tribal feel into it to mix with.
And you even hear that in Coming Your Way, which is the opening cut, where it's got like the hand percussion.
And he was
stuff,
really into a tribal feel underneath this kind of primal rock music, and I really, you know, identify with that sound a lot. I think it's really great.
Sure. And then the last song we just heard before we came back, Before the Beginning, we're starting to kind of get this narrative. We sort of talked about it in the last set about, you know, his fear of success in a lot of ways, and how much Albatross really sort of freaked him out.
Yeah.
And so some of the songs we're going to hear, starting with Before the Beginning, and then in this next set we're going to get into, are almost responses to that in a way, really.
Right, yeah.
So talk about a little bit about
alienation. Time,
So what's going on with a song like Before the Beginning, which came from Then Play On as well? But
I just think that he was hurting really bad. You know, and you hear that Fleetwood recognized that, and that they didn't know what to do. And that he was, you know, like Nick Drake, sort of as a cry for help.
I wrote Nick Drake-esque because it's so lonely and aching and isolated.
Cry for help and that longing to connect, and in a real way. See, again, that's part of that fame. There's a lot of people want to come close to the flame, but you're not really connecting with people.
Yeah, people like you because you're famous. Right. They don't like you because they like you.
Yeah, it's just like Eleanor Rigby, All the Lonely People.
Yeah.
You know, as the Beatles, you know, they were,
it's all their fans screaming.
They couldn't relate. You know, they weren't connecting with them, right? You know, they're just, and so I think that Peter Green was feeling super isolated, and then he's a great blues player, like what you're saying with what B.B. King said, and he was able to convey that through his music, and but it was a cry for help, I think, in a lot of ways, and that's what makes the music really powerful, you know, because he was a great musician and was able to bring that force, you know. I think he gave everything he had to his music, and it sort of destroyed him. You know, it's like he wasn't unable to strike any kind of a balance in his life. You know,
and you hear that in a song we're going to hear in the next set, which was the song he wrote, the single he wrote right after Albatross, which is Man of This World.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's kind of, that's so contemplative about like, I can't remember all the lyrics right offhand, but it's kind of this like, where do I exist? Who am I in this world? You know, all of these kind of things happening.
I did want to comment on the guitar solo and Before the Beginning, because if you do compare it, we played the live version from New Orleans, which I really dig, because I just, you know, again, what he was able to put through his music live is remarkable. I think it's a more powerful version than the studio version, and most rock bands can't achieve that kind of live, you know, presence with their playing, and have the ability to really, you know, totally
transcend.
Exactly. And I think that he was really great at that, you know, and you know, he was just living it, you know.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, this predictive quality to his lyrics too is so kind of really interesting as well. What was I going to say? Around the same time too, I think he's also thinking like, do you think that he felt kind of trapped by the constraints of Fleetwood Mac at this point, and this is why he's going to decide to not only push what he can do with Fleetwood Mac, but also to record this solo record?
He was like going off to jam sessions without him, and they were really getting upset with him. And I think he was just searching for connection, musically, spiritually, in every way. And I think that, again, he was a great musician. I think he was searching, just like Hendrix was searching really hard for, where to take their music to. And I think that he was really reaching for that, so.
And it's around the time that they did those Live at Boston Tea Party shows in like February of 1970. Like Green had already started
quit the band, really.
Well, he more or less quit the band.
Yeah.
He was already against like the wealth.
Yeah.
He wanted to give away a lot of his like wealth to like homeless people and things like. And he almost became this like St. Francis type figure where like he wanted to reject and shed all of that. They said he went away from his Jewish beliefs and started becoming like a Messianic Christian and like really getting But he was also kind of exploring a lot of like new music too. They said like he discovered like krautrock when they had been in like Europe and stuff like that. And then another thing I think is worth kind of talking about, because it's going to come up in this tune here, is he had met with Jerry Garcia.
Yeah.
And I think how much influence, besides obviously maybe the drug influence, but do you think Jerry Garcia got him thinking more about like improvisation, jamming, and things like that? Or
I don't know. He maybe,
yeah. I just didn't know if you knew.
I don't know, like what was musical influence there for him, or
if it was just a drug influence. Some of that kind of stuff.
I think again he was exploring music, and
they had opened for Grateful Dead in their first U.S.
sure he
tour.
was, checking. Well, in fact, real famous Fillmore show was Fleetwood Mac with him, Grateful Dead, and Allman Brothers.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and they were all kind of in
just
that
like
same
like a jamming craziness.
Right,
That's pretty wild. Mm-hmm. Now we haven't really mentioned much, but we talked about him a little bit in the last set. But beyond, I mean, people have talked about how good like a guy like Danny Kerwin was too. Do you think he complimentary? Like,
oh yeah. How
do these other guitar players work with his sound?
I think the way I hear it is Jeremy Spencer was sort of picked by Fleetwood.
He was more the Elmore James guy, right?
Yeah, and I don't think Peter Green liked him.
Okay.
And that's why he brought Kerwin in, because he wanted somebody to complement his playing, and it was like Spencer, his songs are one thing, and Peter Green's, when you hear those albums, for me, I just assume most of the time do away with the Spencer songs. Not that he's bad, it doesn't work with other stuff, for me. And I think he wanted that. And I think Kerwin was that foil. And again, you put all three guitar players in. I think that Spencer is doing the slide guitar on Albatross, which is really great. So I'm not like...
Yeah, like I said, I think he liked some more traditional, some blues stuff like Elmore James.
Right, but he was a great
Chuck
slide
Berry
player.
Stuff,
But, he was good when, again, Green told him what to do. And he didn't like that either. So he was kind of wanting to go a different way.
So one of the songs we were going to play if we had more time was this great improvisation song from Live at Boston Tea Party, Rattlesnake Shake. But instead, let's kind of get into, I guess, the improvisation that he's going to do on his solo record.
Right.
How does he arrive at the end of the game? Because this album is important to you.
It's probably my favorite rock album. It probably had the most single impact on me of any album. I remember reading at some point, after Peter Green had kind of had his drug issues, and the record really got panned in the press, and Peter Green sort of dismissed it as like, just sort of almost
a failed
like,
experiment.
Yeah. But I never heard it that way. I've always heard it as sort of a improvisational rock masterpiece, and I don't hear any other electric guitar instrumental album that comes close to it.
I mean, they're
so stylized usually, and this record just isn't any of that.
It's pretty open.
Yeah. And it's all, and I guess the way I understood it is that Peter Green was just into jamming, and
wasn't it just 3 jam sessions?
Yeah, right. And then he just added to things out, just same way Miles did. Bitches Brew.
Yeah,
it's just like just play for a few days and then pick the highlights out.
Yeah,
and they're great highlights. I think he titled the songs that way. Again, a personal experience I had. I bought the album because I was a huge Fleetwood Mac Peter Green fan. And I remember I found a promotional copy of it at a record store, really cheap, and I didn't even know that the record was coming out. And I bought it, and I took it home and I listened to it. And I honestly didn't know what it was. I didn't really get it, but I love Peter Green, and I was mystified. The guitar sound was kind of haunting, and it pulled me in a little bit. So I listened again, and I don't, recall real vividly. But then I remember shortly after I had it one night, I turned off all the lights in the room, and I put it on. I think I was alone. My parents were gone. I turned it up really loud, and the song "Timeless Time" came on, and I remember it just blew me away. And I remember thinking, this is like such a concrete thing for me. I thought, wow, I don't know how long that song was. I don't know if it was 2 minutes or 20 minutes. And usually I had a pretty good sense of it. Yeah. And so I turned the light on to see what the name of the song was so I could remember it. And then it said Timeless Time. And I remember, I got like chills, right? And it was like it was the first time for me that like I really made a connection like really strongly with instrumental music communicating a concrete message. Yeah. And that, I think
that's like your pathway to jazz, kind of, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think for a lot of people it was the national anthem by Hendrix where he's doing the bomb sounds and he's got his, he's playing the song and you can follow the lyrics and then follow what he's thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's a masterpiece in its own right. But this really impressed me because it wasn't about the national anthem.
It wasn't flashy.
This was about Timeless Time, right? And it was just like, wow, how do you communicate that? And then, he seemed to do such a good job of it, I thought. And then that really just, it was a real turning point for me. It was shortly after that, I knew a guy that was into jazz that ran a record store, and he asked me what I liked, and I named Peter Green, and I named a King Crimson song, and he said, "Oh, you like improvising?" And I didn't even know what the word meant at the time, and I said, "I don't know." He said, "Why don't you listen to jazz? Because they improvise all the time." And he was right. I mean, the minute I didn't relate to the sound at first, but the minute I got it, then it became really hooked on it.
And how much improvising? I mean, we'll talk a lot more about this probably with the Allman Brothers, but how much improvising did you hear in rock at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it was there. I mean, King Crimson and Hendrix and
because like Machine Gun,
Cream,
stuff like that.
Those bands were improvising a lot, and
because it's part of the blues at some level, which jazz and blues are interrelated. If you go back to,
like when you get to something like some of Hendrix's songs or Peter Green or something, it's almost Hendrix Machine Gun. It's almost hard to call it a tune. You know what I mean? Like it's not really a tune anymore. It's like a journey or something. You're right. And so that Cream to me were still playing tunes. I mean,
for sure.
They're great.
No, I know what you're saying.
They're great.
They're very locked in.
Yeah. Yep. But so that was a distinction that I made. I think that I still carry with me that matters to me. And so Peter Green just sort of was on that wavelength. However he got there or whatever.
Yeah,
but
because some people have criticized this album as like a LSD haze. Different things like that.
At the time I was listening to it, there was no drug influence in my life at all. It was pure music, and it was great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's stuff you're going to hear when we get into this. The tune's called Bottoms Up, but like you got this wah-wah sort of Hendrix intro.
Right. People said that the wah-wah was destroyed the pristine beauty of the. I read that in an interview review once. Yeah, again, it was sound. It was
like a sonic journey. Is what he started taking you on. You know what I mean? Like
a band like Pink Floyd is recording pre-recorded sounds and mixing them in, and these guys were pushing the limits of the guitar. They're just doing it natural. Yeah.
I mean, there's things like you as a rhythm guy, because you're a bass player. I mean, some of the rhythmic grooves that they sort of pocket in this song are really, it's like oscillating. Yeah. It's really crazy.
And again, what I hear back after I've read more about Peter Green and the fact that he was kind of mesmerized by Santana and the percussion, is I hear a sort of a tribal vibe to it. And again, I should mention the name of the album, End of the Game, was an intentional name. it was his statement. I'm out of the game.
I'm out of rock.
Yeah, I'm out of the game of rock and roll.
Yeah.
It is leaving that in the dust, and it is moving into something else. Which again, I thought was really cool. And then when I read that he didn't think it was cool, it kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
But I just thought, this is the real thing, and it isn't about playing tunes on the radio.
Yeah, it's like beyond. It's like art.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not rock, it's not pop hits or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and one thing that was kind of interesting, I was going to say. We were just talking about it. The guitar tone and some of the things that he's doing. Some people that I've read said that they compare what he's doing on Bottoms Up to some of the stuff like Jimmy Page will later do, like with the live Led Zeppelin sort of sound.
Yeah.
I think, how much do you think people were in? I
think everybody listened to everybody else.
Okay.
I think that if you were good at something, how could you not pay attention to the other people who are good at it?
Yeah.
It's like I play acoustic bass. I think I've listened to tons and tons of great acoustic bass players. You just, when you hear the ones that you go, wow, that guy's so great, I'll never be able to do that, that kind of thing. And, but I think you're aware. I recently, John Lindbergh, acoustic bass jazz great, was here, and Francois Rabath is an acoustic bass player I really love, and I mentioned it, and he goes, when I was in France, I saw him 2 or 3 times. you just know that
there's a language everybody's speaking.
Right,
it's like almost a hidden code.
I was surprised, but I wasn't. That's my point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what we've got next is this Bottoms Up tune from Peter Green from End of the Game, and then we'll take you into Man of the World, which is the sort of quieter, it's kind of more sensitive, melancholic sort of side. And then we're going to come out with a song called A Fool No More from the BBC sessions. And I guess we can talk about this really quick, sort of introduce it. But this is another one of those songs where I kind of wrote it's like prophetic. It predicts his retreat from Fleetwood Mac and the music business.
Yeah.
It's this kind of haunting narrative of like this drifter and, it's the mythos of the blues is right in it. He's talking about his woman and all. It's all the blues cliches, but it's done not cliche. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
fresh,
cool.
and again, he lived the blues. It was real. I think that, again, go back to the B.B. King.
Yeah.
It's real blues.
The staccato guitar stings he does here. It's like John Lee Hooker, like cuts. Almost. Yeah. It's cool. So you'll dig that, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more after.
Yeah, nice dynamics again in those quiet songs. Where he'll really rip out a power solo and then pull back. And, really great sense.
And this is definitely one of those songs we talked about in the very beginning, where it's the space between the notes. I think that really works wonders here. That kind of quiet, like you said, he knows how to create space and energy and things like that. So.
Yeah, it's whatever that is, just that the music's the art of time, and he was just deep in the moment, and really could time it out, just have the right feel.
For sure. All right, we'll enjoy Bottoms Up from his solo record, End of the Game, Man of the World, which is just a single, and then from BBC, A Fool No More.
Shall I tell you about my life? They say I'm a man of the world. I've flown across every tide. I've seen lots of pretty girls. I guess I've got everything I need. I wouldn't ask more, and there's no one I'd rather be. I just wish I'd never been born. And I mean a good woman that made me feel like a good man should. I don't say I'm a good man, oh, but I would be if I could. I could tell you about my life and keep you amused, I'm sure, about all the times I cried and how I don't want to be sad anymore, and how I wish I was in love. Yes, I'm packed up my clothes. I'm moving away from your door. Yes, I'm packed up my clothes. I'm moving away from your door. You know I've been your fool for so long. Babe, I won't play that fool no more. You made me spend all my money. I worked as hard as I can. I came home early one morning. I found you with another man. I'm packed up my clothes. I'm moving away from your door. You know I've been your fool for so long. And I won't be that fool no more. So goodbye, baby. You don't even care. had a love so strong for you, but you treat me so unfair. I'm packed up my clothes, I'm moving away from your door. Yes, I've been your fool for so long. Never won't play that fool no more.
That was Bottoms Up, Man of the World, and then we end it with A Fool No More from the BBC sessions. And so we're kind of closing things out here with Fleetwood Mac and the Peter Green kind of era of that. And one thing, we talked about was the journey into LSD and some of the stuff that was going on there. And this is kind of a time where not only is Peter Green kind of like separating himself from the music industry, but he's also kind of separating, he's starting to kind of go down a pretty dark mental journey here, right?
Yeah, he's sort of, separating from reality almost on some level, if you will. Losing his ability to almost function, if you will.
There's this weird...
it's almost like a Sid Barrett kind of a journey.
For sure.
Yeah. Maybe not quite as extreme, but pretty close, I think.
And there's this weird story about Munich where supposedly like a aristocratic cult of some sort wanted to get his money, so they dosed him real bad, and and that's kind of like the for him, with the band at least. He does stuff to talk about where he's at kind of today. Like I know he did like the Splinter Group. But, is he like healthier now, or has he been in a better state?
I think he's stabilized. Again, I don't know, but it just seems like, whatever his issues were, they were stabilized to some degree with probably meds or something. Yeah. And he's able to function and stuff. And he's, he's a great guitar player. It still shines through on some tracks. But again, that drive and that, the determination, that part just seems like it lobotomized or something to me. And I'm not, whatever. He's one of my favorite musicians. And in that program, you can still see where he's very aware of the music. Sharp. Yeah, but it's just, it's just how you define that stuff. It's really...
And the program where I think we forgot to mention, if you go on YouTube, there's a kind of the story of Peter Green. It's like a BBC thing. It's usually cut up in a couple pieces. It's really neat. It's nice.
And it's informative. It's not a happy tale, but if you like his music, it's interesting. And he's a survivor. Most of the stars we talked off, Mike didn't survive, and he did, and which is probably fortunate that he's able to talk about some of this stuff a little bit. I wanted to ask you something before we get too far. I was kind of I was enamored with the album Into the Game, but I was kind of curious how that sounds to you guys. Do you think that's interesting or not as interesting, or where does that?
It's so weird because by the time I heard that record, you had already gotten me into a lot of jazz. You know what I mean? So maybe it wasn't as strange to me because I had already been listening to Bitches Brew and things that.
But do you hear it as a great album? Or?
Oh, I think that Bottom. I haven't pulled that record out in a while, and then for the show, listen to Bottoms Up. I was like, man, it's meditative. The oscillating groove and some of that, and that's where I hear that record, and I hear a lot of almost like krautrock, like Can type stuff. How they would do these weird percussive oscillating things,
but still kind of based on blues rock as opposed to techno, like that stuff.
Sure, that techno. Became kind of electronic music or something. Yeah. No, I dig it. I don't know how familiar Mark is with. You probably haven't heard that record in years.
It's been a while. I was going to listen to it on the way up here, but I didn't have it on my phone.
Yeah. It's something, like I said, I forget. I forget that I have it sometimes. You do that sometimes. Right.
I also really like the cover art on that record.
It is pretty neat. It's like a some kind of cat.
Yeah, thing, right? It's close up of a
leopard. Panther or leopard.
Growling, and on the back a lion sleeping in a tree, and again the metaphoric layer of Into the Game, and just sort of that tribal thing, and I read so many things. I don't know who designed the cover and if Peter Green even knew what they were going to use, but I've always really dug it. It is not personalized though. See, that's what I think is part of what he wanted. He didn't want to be a picture of him on the cover. Yep. It was a musical statement, and
judge it for itself without my name.
Right, kind of like the White Album by the Beatles or something. Yeah.
And that's like kind of almost a good segue to sort of where he kind of finishes off with Fleetwood Mac, which is the last song he recorded in the studio with them, which is the Green Man Alishi. May of 1970, I think, is when it was released. I think it was recorded in like January, maybe. Yep. And this is a song, like I said, metalheads. We've talked about it before with Judas Priest. It's on the very famous Unleashed in the East. Yep. The live record that's pretty notorious for Judas Priest.
Live record,
live studio record. And kind of the story I have here is money to him sort of started to represent the devil. And it was sort of written as a drug-induced dream about a green dog. And he said, it scared me because I knew the dog had been dead a long time. It was a stray, and I was looking after it, but I was dead, and I had to fight to get back into my body, which I eventually did. And when I woke, the room was blacked. And he said he connected that to sort of Robert Johnson's Hellhound on My Trail. Yeah. This dog symbolizing this fate or fatalism or something like that. And wealth to him was the same thing that I guess the devil was to Johnson. And he almost had trouble recording the song because it freaked him out so much. So I think he had to get some other people.
Line, all my trying is up, all your bringing is down. I think that sort of symbolizes his music struggle, just in those lyrics right there. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have always thought Green Man Alishi was like about the devil, but it's not really not. It's money. Yeah. Money is the devil in his mind. And so the version that we have is a little bit different than the version that's people are probably most familiar with, and it's another version from the Live at Boston Tea Party, and it's pretty long. It's a lot of improvisations and things like that. But I mean, this song is kind of held up as by metal people as like kind of a metallic almost statement.
I hear it like really breaking away from the blues. I hear if to me like if he would have continued on along those lines with Fleetwood Mac, I could see like a Led Zeppelin thing,
Deep really, Purple or something. That sort of
but again, the arrangement of the song stands out to me more than Zeppelin or any of the other bands because it, for a single, it's a really intricate piece. Even the way he's like kind of screaming on the single at the end of it is almost like haunting and otherworldly. It's like whoa, it really seems like it's coming out of some dark space or something.
And he might not have been all completely there as far as we know. That's who knows where his state of mind was in the
studio. But it really does, just like the supernatural sounds like it's coming from another world or something.
Primordial universe,
this song has those qualities, but it's a highly developed, sophisticated rock single that isn't really a pop song at all. It's just a cool tune.
It's kind of scary in a way. It's got that.
And again, it's really just a great piece of music, and very singular in rock and roll. I don't really see where there's much else like it. Really.
For sure. So, any closing thoughts or last statements you would want people who are maybe kind of trying to place Fleetwood Mac in their universe or this era?
I guess, again, where I would come from with anything is just, listen carefully. The great music is timeless, and the supernatural and Green Man Alishi and these songs are not about hits or not about being cool. They're a statement, and they resonate today. Just like whatever Mona Lisa might as a painting, it's just a great work of art, and try to just hear it for what it is and appreciate. I think the fact that Peter Green, for a brief period of time, Bolt of Lightning was a master on the guitar that really could express how he felt.
Do you think he'll be appreciated?
I think he's more and more. It's coming around. I'm noticing it way more now than before. Yeah,
I
think the blues fans recognize it because they can hear what a great blues player is. But I think it transforms just playing blues tunes.
I think too, like something like the internet will help a guy like Peter Green because you can check out these live cuts and share them and
and it's so. I don't know. The thing that I'm showing my age with, I'm confused with, is I don't know. I think the internet, you lose a sense of context, and I don't.
Yeah.
And I think context is important to appreciate in this era. The uncompromising desires of the artists. I think that part's lost on people today because everybody wants.
Well, I think art has become commodity.
Everything is, and everybody wants.
If you sell records, you're an artist, but it's not.
Everybody wants everything, and they want it today. And that idea of like being a sellout or not being a sellout, it isn't even like an issue in 99.9% of people's minds. And I think with people like Hendrix and Peter Green and whomever you might be talking about. It was, to live and die for, really. Yeah. And that's a difference. It's hard to just get that off of YouTube or something.
For sure. Yep. So, all right. Well, we're going to close out with the Green Manalishi. Mike, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Once again, it's cool to always be able to get you. And I think we're going to have you back for another pair of shows here pretty quick as well. Let us know what you thought. Shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter at Podcast Requiem. You can go onto our Patreon site. Just look up Requiem Podcast. And if you'd like to become a Patreon donator, that'd be awesome. And also check us out on Facebook, Mark and Jason. And cool. Yeah, I think this was fun. It's always nice to kind of get away from some of the traditional, expected metal trappings and things like that. And I mean, I think you can see the blues of the devil's music. This is the undertone of metal. You know.
Well, I mean, Black Sabbath was a blues.
They were Earth. Blues.
Yeah. Again, I think all of this was mixing around and it was branching out
for sure.
And they were. Peter Green was one of the greats.
Indeed. Yeah, I'm really happy you turned me on to him when I was quite young because it's always awkward for me to like play him for people that think they know great guitar players. And they're kind of like, whoa, I was a Clapton fan, but this guy's changing my perspective on stuff. So cool. Well, for Requiem Metal Podcast, I'm Jason
and I'm Mark.
The day goes to sleep and the full moon night is so black that the darkness cooks. You come creeping around, making me do things I don't want. That you need my love so bad. Come sneaking around, trying to drive me mad. Spinning on my dreams, making me see things I don't want. You're the green Manalishi with a two-pronged crown. All my trying is up, all you're bringing is down. All of them running away, leaving me here just trying to keep from following you. Thank you. Thank you. That's the end of our first set. That's the end of our first set. We'll see you again a bit later on.
Let's have a really big background applause for Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac. They'll be coming back later. They're just kind of getting warmed up, and they'll be coming back to do another set in just a little while.